tonight. So before we start, there will be some logistical informations. There will be 3 interpretation channels for today's sessions. If you need Bahasa language, please use Japanese channel. So sorry for the mistaken of the name. And if you need the Portuguese channel, you could choose Portuguese also in the interpretation mode. Sebelum kita mulai, Bapak, Ibu, dan teman-teman semua, pada sesi hari ini akan ada beberapa interpretation channel untuk teman-teman yang membutuhkan translasi dalam bahasa Indonesia, harap menggunakan channel Japanese. Mohon maaf jika ada terjadi kesalahan rename ya di interpretation channel ini. Jadi kalau butuh bahasa, harap menggunakan Japanese channel. Okay, so hopes everyone already find a way for the interpretation channels. So before we start, I would like to tell that this event is organized by G20 Environment, Climate Justice, and Energy Transition Working Group. Specifically, we have a sub-working group called Agriculture, Forestry, and Land Use and Rights. And this is part of the event of this sub-working group. C20 is one of the stakeholder engagement mechanism within G20 architectures. And some people often ask whether the G20 is really listened to us. Maybe yes, maybe not. However, I think as a civil society, we already used to this uphill task, and we will continue the dialogue and engagement whenever we have a change to raise our voices. And at every chance of that, we hope that G20 leaders will actually listen to the voices of civil societies and community, especially that affected by the climate crisis. As the background of the event, we already know that the effect of the climate crisis is already in front of our eyes, where record high temperature have wrecked around the world for the past weeks. And we know that we are at a critical junctures, not only in our fight against the climate crisis, but also examining issues such as equality, human rights, and collective rights. However, often we see the realities created unfavorable conditions for inclusions in climate action and climate policies, where women, girls, indigenous groups, people with disability, and youth, and many other marginalized community have barriers to have a say in climate decisions making. So it is very important because they are disproportionately feel the climate change impacts due to entrenched social norms, gender divisions of right, decision-making power, and access to and control over resources such as financial services, technology, and social capital. And specifically for agriculture, forestry, and land use sectors, aside from increasing deforestations and forest degradations, wildfire, and loss of biodiversity at the global level, the agriculture, forestry, and land use sectors is also still plagued with land use conflicts, for instance. Ill clean energy and food security solutions, destroying the land and local wisdoms of local farmers, inappropriate land-based mitigations that conflict with environmental and social sustainability, and also the lack of recognitions of the rights of indigenous people and local communities. Upholding the principles of climate environmental justice should be the heart of finding the best solutions relating to climate change, and in discussions, the priority of G20. Therefore, this webinar is held to talk about that issues, especially from wonderful speakers that already in here with various backgrounds. So the government leadership that is responsible and accountable to its people is really critical now. And we need to push a just climate transitions where it requires renegotiations of already unequal rights and reimaginations of the relationship between people and natures. And also, it demands societal and government support for human rights-based approach and inclusive, locally safe solutions. This event will bring a very interesting discussion tonight, inviting many speakers and representatives from different parts of the world. There are from Indonesia, Brazil, and Antigua and Barbuda. So let's not wait any longer. Let's say hi to them first, maybe. So the first one, I would like to say hello to one of my colleagues in here. Hello, Tori.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
How are you? How are you? It's
Fine.
quite late night at your time, right? Hope it's okay. And the second one, there is a Ruth Spencer from Antigua and Barbuda. Hello, Ruth. Hope you are good there.
Hello, I'm fine. Glad to be here with you.
Thank you also to be here. And we also have Anggalia Putri, or we usually call it Kaanggi. Hello, Kaanggi, are you there yet?
Hi, Karti. Hello, everyone. I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kaanggi. And there is another speaker, Fal Munduruku, Indigenous activist from Brazil, but she's still processing to enter this webinar. So let's wait for her and let's say hi in the middle of the session. So thank you for the speakers and all of the, and also I forget the, sorry, I forget the one key persons also in here. Hello, Bu Mardiana.
Halo, selamat malam. Terima kasih. Hanya saya dalam keadaan sehat dan baik. Terima kasih buat semuanya.
Selamat malam, Bu Mardiana. Thank you also for being here. And thank you for all the speakers and all the participants that are joining here today. So today we will hear various perspectives from different countries, how we could have a just climate transitions and what are their demands or hope to put the environmental and climate justice in the heart of our climate decision and actions. We have a various background of panel, intergenerational, international. So, sorry for that. I hope every participant could mute their mic. So I personally can wait to hear more from our speakers. So for the one who just joined the sessions, welcome again. And please make sure you could also introduce yourself, from which organization and which country in the chat box, so we could know more each other's, even though we couldn't see face-to-face in these situations. So during the sessions, for those of you who have questions or remarks or feedback for the speakers, you are welcome to write that in the chat box, or later on in the question and answer session, you could also use the raise hand features, and there will be a sessions you could ask directly your questions. Okay, let's not wait no more. So for the first speakers, we have together with us today, Tori Kuswardono. He is a climate advocate and also executive director of PICULS. Let's hear from him. Hello, Bang Tori.
Yes, hello, Arti.
So maybe you could also, before your presentation, I know you have a presentation, you could also explain a little bit more about the organizations, and maybe what do you think about this climate justice narrative and implementations, and specifically, we want to know your view related the significance of IPCC 6 assessment report to push more for environmental and climate justice agenda. The floor is yours, Bang Tori.
Okay, thank you, Arti. Good evening, everyone, everybody. First, I would like to say thank you to the organizing committee who's inviting me. I think it's been years for me. I left the International Fora for Climate Justice maybe 4 years, and I returned back as you invited me. So first, I would like to express my tribute to all the CSO indigenous peoples and in all over the world, and all those local communities, females who's fighting for climate justice, for environmental justice and social justice at global fora and also within the countries. It's been 30 years of the struggle since the Rio in 1992, and this is for the first time, I think, in the assessment report of the IPCC. The climate justice is part of the center of the report. So I will start my presentation. So
you have an access to share screen, right? Oh. Okay, let's wait then. So while waiting for the presentations, okay.
Yeah.
We see now.
Yeah. The organizing committee asked me to explain the significance of the of climate justice on the IPCC assessment report 6, working group 2, impact and adaptations. Maybe because I have time to read all the 3,000 pages, not all the 3,000 pages, but some part that is actually my interest, particularly on climate justice issues. So yes, as I said before, this report is quite interesting because the assessment report 6, which is talking about the adaptation solutions, it said that it is said that in the report itself said that the report highlights the adaptation solutions which are effective, feasible, and conform to principles of justice. So it is self-explanatory. It is the IPCC highlighted the climate justice as the issues, as the important issue, as the priority issues that need to be the center of discussion of the particularly on the adaptations. So it said that this report recognizes the value of diverse forms of knowledge, such as scientific as well as indigenous knowledge and local knowledge, in understanding and evaluating climate adaptation process and actions to reduce risk from human-induced climate change. Assessment report 6 highlights adaptation solutions which are effective, feasible, and conform to principles of justice. It is in the page 5. So already in the beginning of the report, it's already the report already explaining about the principles of justice. And of course, there's a special chapter in the report talking about the inequality, the examples of injustice, and highlighting what kind of justice that we need to address in the whole discussions, in the whole debates, of climate change. So it says also that increasing the climate justice, climate justice and right-based approach are increasingly recognized as key principles within mitigations and adaptation strategies and projects. So there are a lot of CSO, a lot of communities are doing the solutions of on mitigations and adaptations based on right-based and also on climate justice. So it is the IPCC recognize all the works of all the people in the planet talking about climate justice and making climate justice and right-based issues on the fields, and it is recognized by the IPCC, by the report itself. So it is truly in the center of the report. And if we go back to the past, in 2014, the assessment report 5, climate justice discussion is very minimal. But then 1 year later, in Paris Agreement, thanks to also to all the people who is actually pushing climate justice, right-based human rights issues in climate change, the Paris Agreement adopt climate justice on the text, the human rights on the text, Indigenous people's rights on the text, local communities' rights on the text, gender on the text. So it is actually the biggest, one of the biggest milestones in the discussions and the debates of justice within climate change issues. And finally, in 2002, this is wrong. It's actually wrong typing. Actually, a typo. It's actually in 2022, the assessment report 6. It says that the report expanded attentions to inequity and climate vulnerability and responses, the role of power and participations in the processes of implementations, unequal and differential impacts, and climate justice. Again, the attentions, so climate justice is there in the paragraph of the report. So there are a lot of climate justice works in the assessment report 6 compared to assessment report 5. So if we go to the statistics, works related to the climate justice is about 182 phrase on assessment report 6 compared only 3 phrases in assessment report 5. And we can look at other climate related words related to climate justice in the report. We can I compare the numbers of the words and the phrases. Inequality is like 450 versus 111. Equity is 394 compared to 134. Climate justice 182 compared to 3. Recognitions is 164 compared to 3. Injustice 49 compared to 7. Distributive justice is 19 compared to 2. Procedural justice is only 17 and compared to 2. So it is quite a leap of the report of the assessment report 5. The assessment report 6 truly make the climate justice equality recognitions of the most vulnerable of agencies of the different agencies, different units of social units as the center of the report that needs to be recognized and to be acknowledged, to be empowered, to be given space to speak up and giving and involve get more involved in the debate of climate change. So it is also said that the driver of climate injustice is about uneven distribution of wealth and power between countries and within the countries. And countries like Indonesia, for instance, injustice is happening, and I think in the past 3 years, everyone talking about the shrinking of democratic space. While if we compare to the recommendations, to the discussions in the report, participations, recognitions of the voice of the people is very important if we want to address the climate crisis. So in terms of climate justice perspective, it is the report also say that a more just society is more capable of successful adaptations, while that only adaptations that result in a more just society can be judged successful. And this report also make an assessment of thousands of papers that around 60% of the report said that maladaptations, the adaptations programs, adaptation activities made by government, made by international agencies, is considered as maladaptations because it creates more vulnerability, more injustice, and also more vulnerability to the people and also to the environment. And I think it is also, although the report is basically on adaptations, but I think it is also happening in the mitigations. The mitigation sector, if we talk about the climate justice perspective on mitigations, I think the injustice will be bigger than in the adaptation sectors. It might be because on mitigations, climate justice is not in the center of the discussions, aside of how to mitigate and keep the temperature below 2 degrees centigrade. And what is the call from the assessment report to climate justice? What needs to be done? The report explains what needs to be done if you want to have a climate justice process. There are four steps, not steps, but four pillars of climate justice that needs to be fight. It needs to be done by all the societies and government and CSO and everyone in the world. If you want to have a just world and also addressing the climate crisis. First is the recognition of justice. We need to recognitions to the most vulnerable people is important. No one in SDGs it is said that no one left behind, but of course in many in reality there are a lot of people who is actually left behind even in the adaptation projects. They are not recognized as a group that needs to be involved, that needs to be participate in the process of designing adaptations process or even in the development in the bigger development process. The second one is the procedural justice. Recognition is not enough. It has to be a procedure so people can exercise their rights, exercise their voice. I think the procedure to include people in every decision making, even from decision making, from the policy to implementations, even to the design of projects, is there are gaps there. There's no procedure that's actually very or not. There is very little of procedure that actually have a true participations of the people, and then we can say that most of the participation now is tokenism. It's not a true participation. The third one is the distributive justice. This is actually the principle of environmental justice, the principle of climate justice. We need to address this. We need to have what kind of justice that we want, how the burden and the benefits will be shared. In the principle of distributive justice, it is said that the least advantage should be get more benefits than the other one. So we need to see, so it is clear if we are talking about distributive justice, we are talking about the theory of justice of John Rawls. It is about benefiting the least advantage, not benefiting the already rich, the 1%. And the last one, the fourth one, to make this happen, we need a flexible and strong institutions. We need an institutions that allow society to respond quickly to the demands of changing environment by developing new institutions or adjusting existing one quickly, not waiting for the prolonged procedure, a long bureaucratic and sophisticated bureaucracy. It needs to be quick and flexible. Once we found, we need a governance that can make it something right. When they find something is going wrong, then they need to stop the process and make it right. Not waiting, not just spending the money because of on the sake of accountability, of financial accountability only. It is about the safety of the people. It is about the safety of the planet. And there is also attention to the commitment of governance and institutions that is actually in the report. There is the report assessed that there is increasing evidence that successful adaptations and perhaps mitigations depends on the equitable development and climate justice. So there's one, but there is a low levels of commitment to distributive justice. So when justice is one of many goals of adaptations instead of the prime one, it is insufficient to promote equitable distributions of benefits and harms. So justice has to be the top priority. It should be the primary indicators of each actions regarding with adaptations and mitigations. And also climate justice requires considerations of the legal, institutional, and governance framework that significantly determine whether adaptations is successful and addressing the needs of the poor. So we need to also include climate justice on the legal, institutional, and governance. It should be in the law. It should be in the outcomes, indicators, and also how to measure adaptations in all over the world. So I think from this insight, this is only small insights of the assessment report, because if I tell all the stories, it's quite long. And if you go to the report, you can find a lot of stories, a lot of examples about injustice, and also how climate justice can improve, can make better conditions in the during the climate crisis, to address the climate crisis. I think that's my presentations. I'm sorry if I a little bit my English is a little bit not fluid enough.
It's all right.
It's been a long time since I haven't presented in English.
I think for most of us, English is not our first language, so it's all right. Thank you, Bang Tori, for setting the context of climate justice and very interesting reflections on how the IPCC already recognized the justice aspects in the report also. So it's not only the voices of the civil society, but also the academicians and all of the authors that make those reports. And also the strong statements that say that only adaptations and mitigations that result in a more just society can be judged successful. I think it's very powerful quote. So before we go to the next speaker, Tori, I want to ask you a little bit regarding the 4 principles that you mentioned before. So in your view, what is the current big challenge to implement those principles in our climate change governments, and how us as civil society maybe could push more for those principle implementations?
Yeah, I think implicitly, IPCC said that democracy, a participatory democracy, is the center of the answers of the crisis. And as we understand, in Indonesia, in many parts of the world, democracy is under threat, and we need. I think it is the time for the civil society to, I would say, let's move to the street back again. Let's do what needs to be done, because as Obama said during the Black Lives Matter actions in 2020, change cannot be made only in the parliament, in the decision-making building, but has to be done from the streets. And I think this the front line of the struggle on climate justice is not only about lobbying and advocacy. We need to make people understand that this is our rights as the people of the planet, because there is no planet B. There's no planet B. We need to get involved more people to say about their concerns, and giving and force the government to open their doors to listen to the people, both in terms of the crisis and also the solutions that already there, because IPCC already compiled many solutions that created by the communities, by local communities, that actually is not listened by the government. It's only as I would say that the government used the local solutions from the community as the etalage of the show windows for the sake of the climate conference, not more than that. But what's actually happening within the country, how the government could protect, could promote, and also could incorporate the voice, and also the solutions from the community still needs to be struggled. It is a struggle. It is a multi-level struggle that we need to enhance now. It is the time, because it's not only us now who speaks. All the academics already said something like this, and I think the report of the IPCC can be the foundations of every struggle that we have been doing for 30 years. That's, I think, Arti.
Thank you, Tori. So for all of the participants, if you have questions or remarks or feedbacks, or maybe disagreements, maybe towards us that Tori mentioned, just use the chat box to interact. And if you want to ask more detail, we could use the question and answer sessions in the later stage and use the raise hand features. So for the next speakers, we also have Ruth Spencers, a representative from Antigua and Barbuda, and she has a lot of experience for community development and practicing people-centered approach that's very critical to address the climate crisis issues. Hi, Ruth.
Hello, thanks for this opportunity to share our stories, how we fight climate injustice.
Yeah.
So I'm going to focus at the local level, because that's where we can have the greatest impact. Sometimes at the international level, we get barred from entering meetings. Our badges prevent us from, real active inclusion and participation, but I'm going to focus at the local level. So coming from Caribbean states, Antigua is a small island nation. And as Tori said, there's unequal distribution of power and wealth. So one of the greatest forms of climate injustice is exclusion, when you are blatantly left out of environmental and national policy-making decision processes. And this is so important for our local groups to have a voice. Because in my country, when you make wrong environmental decisions, they cannot be solved. No money, no cash, no loss and damage can replace those vibrant ecosystems that God designed especially to protect us. We live in a part of the world where our protection is very important. Protection from hurricanes, storms, natural disasters. And as you know, they are increasing in numbers, in frequencies, and intensities. So what happens in my country? We are a tourist island, and lots of investors come to the government wanting to set up these industries, hotels. And you know, we have laws in place. We have protected areas. And by law, these areas are not to be used for investments. But recently, since the COVID, the government has been blatantly overriding the laws, the legislations, and giving these areas out for investors. These are areas that are our fishing grounds. They provide livelihoods, they're birding areas, they're cultural and historical value. And can you imagine investors placing investments in these areas? The sad thing is that, as one judge told me, the government has these as state secrets. You don't hear about them. You only know about these decisions when they are leaked. And you know what happens? There's no community consultations. There's no access to key information. And so these cause frustrations, they cause a lot of conflicts in the island, because our communities know that these are sacred areas that must be protected. In addition, if there is a consultation, many times it's not happening in the areas where the people live. Instead, something is said where they have to go into the city, but this is not effective. We are demanding that any development taking place in our communities, we want access to information on time. We want the location, the timing to be put in a central area so that we can prepare ourselves, but this is not normally done. So what's been happening? With no consultations, no access to information, and investors getting the rights to have investments in these protected areas, it causes a lot of injustice, because the knowledge of these areas, of these communities, are known by the people. They know what areas flood. They know what ponds have been filled up. And so when these decisions are made without the involvement, the inclusion, the participation of the people, you have many gaps left. And when you have gaps, as I said, in environmental decision-making, you're heading for trouble, because when our protections are not ensured, when we are facing the brunt of hurricanes and storms and have no protections, you know what will happen. It's going to be a lot of damage, a loss of property, a lot of lives. So how do we reach to this point? SDG 16, peace, justice, strong communities and island communities. We are all asking for open, transparent, inclusive, and participatory processes. There must be effective, social safeguards. There must be human rights-based, aimed at the protection of our local stewards and environmental defenders. Now, when our community people see something happening, there might be machine clearing lands and they don't know anything about what's happening. They sound an alarm. These alarms are very important. This helps us to know something is happening and that we need to take action. When these things happen, many times the government says, oh, you're sounding false alarms. Nothing is happening. And it's so important to get information. You live in a community, you see what's happening, and when you sound the alarm, you're called names. You are harassed. Sometimes people lose their jobs. You know, in Latin America, there are a lot of environmental defenders that are killed just protecting their environment. So 2 years ago in 2018, 4 years ago, time is going so fast, my government ratified the Escazú Agreement. The Escazú Agreement was originally called Principal Care. It came out of the 1992 Rio Conventions that Tory spoke about. You see how late this is? From 1992 to 2022. You see how late it is, and many countries still have not ratified. The Escazú Agreement says the environmental issues are best handled by the local people. It requires us to have access to information, access to participation, access to justice. But I always stress that we need the information and the consultations first so that we don't have to move to an access to justice. Give us the information, give us the consultation, give us that opportunity where we can share our local knowledge to prevent damage to our environment. And I have some solutions for our donors. Donors are and investors who want to come to these small island states. They need to listen to the voices of the local people. We must be included even in negotiation for debt swaps. Debt is a major issue that has a neck hole on small island states. We are in so much debt that there's very little funds available for social and capital development. And you know, the governments are negotiating these debt swaps, but I think it's time for the local people to have a say in how these debt swaps are done. I think the local people can add value and significant contribution to the discussions of environmental debt swaps. I want to see this happen. It shouldn't be just governments going to the donors trying to get these debt swaps. Include the local people whose lives have been impacted. We have so much social, crisis coming from these environmental damages that have been taking place in our country. And the change going forward must include local voices. Local voices must be part of the future decision-making processes for climate and the environment. The climate justice we want our voices to be heard. We want to have a say in anything that's going to impact our countries. We have already suffered from so much injustices coming out of colonial injustices. Now with the climate injustice, we want to have a say. We know the solutions. We have local community-based adaptation solutions that the local groups have been conducting that involve people, where people is at the heart of development. And this is what we are working to. This is what we are asking for. New voices in decision making. Let's fill all the gaps. Let's fill all the wrongs that have taken place. Let us make a decision and decide the way forward for ourselves. So these are just some of the points that I wanted to share with you. We need inclusion, we need participation, we need access to information. We want to be a part of that process. We want to be a part of the reporting process. You know, these conventions ask for reports, the SDGs, biodiversity, climate, mercury, chemicals, and waste. Our voices must be a part of those reported. Our contributions are significant, and we want our voices to be heard in the reports and in all the decisions that are made for us. So thanks for giving me this opportunity for sharing with you, so that going forward, we have a voice. Our voices will tell our stories. We have the evidence that our local solutions work, and we want to ensure no harm to our people and to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for a very strong statement. And I think your highlight on how the voices of community in the decision-making process is very critical in addressing the effective climate policy and actions. And also you said about the key for the involvement of local community and the protections of right and environmental defenders, especially the front runners, is very much resonate, I think, with the situations in our country or maybe in the global level also. Before we go to Bu Mardiana, you mentioned about the effectiveness of the local community-based adaptations, right? Could you share maybe to us from your experience, some of the examples or some of the processes that lead to these local community-based adaptations?
Okay, as you know, water is a problem. My country suffers from drought, and we have had some reservoirs built in the 1800s by the British, and the groups, when the health system is not working, when so much ills are showing up on vulnerable people, children, old people, because, you know, health and sanitary issues are so bad, they set about to restore the reservoirs. And those reservoirs have been secured, being transformed, being rehabilitated, and the local knowledge of the elders have made this possible. In addition, we have a lot of groups that are now developing community conservation areas on lands that were once waste dumps. And if you see the wonderful trees, ecosystem restoration that's taking place, leading to heritage and nature parks, the groups have a lot to be proud of. And we are hoping soon to have our first OECM. That's one of the targets for the Biological Convention. We are hoping to have at least 2 to 3 of those OECMs being developed in Antigua. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So hopefully this kind of, we could amplify this kind of solution. So this kind of solution is not only recognized, but also supported by the adequate climate finance that could reach the local level, not only the big projects and mega projects, right? Okay, thank you. So for participants, if you have a question for Ruth, just put first on the chat box and we will get back to you on the question and answers session. Thank you, Ruth. And now go to the next speakers. We have a representative from Adat community in here in Indonesia, Bu Mardiana. And as the background that we know that indigenous peoples and local-based communities form 55% of the global populations, yet take care of 80% of the planet remaining biodiversity. So, Bu Mardiana, maybe could you share to us, Bu, why protecting indigenous people rights is very critical for us to address the climate crisis issues, and what is your hopes and maybe demands for our G20 leaders? The floor is yours, Bu Mardiana.
Terima kasih.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. Good evening for the organizer who give me the opportunity and to trust me
untuk mempertahankan segala menyampaikan permasalahan yang ada di masyarakat adat dan mempertahankan alam dan hutan kami. masyarakat adat semangat, masyarakat adat bangkit, masyarakat adat bersatu. Kami mempertahankan ini karena bumi sudah melahirkan segala sumber kehidupan dan napas kehidupan bagi kami masyarakat adat. Di alam sudah menyediakan segalanya untuk sumber kehidupan kami. Jadi kehidupan kami sangat erat kaitannya dengan alam, dengan hutan, dengan lingkungan, dengan apa yang dengan makhluk hidup. Juga dengan penjaga alam, penjaga hutan, itu sangat erat kaitannya dengan kami. Jadi kami sebenarnya dituduh adalah perusak alam, dituduh pembabat hutan, kami dituduh merusak lingkungan, kami dianggap menghambat pembangunan. Tetapi hal itu sebenarnya tidak pernah kami lakukan. Kami sangat mencintai alam, kami sangat mencintai bumi, karena kami tahu bumi itu sudah melahirkan segalanya untuk kami. Jadi setiap kami mau melakukan kegiatan, membuka ladang, kami selalu melakukan ritual. Mohon izin dari alam, mohon izin dari bumi, mohon izin dari makhluk yang tidak nampak yang tinggal di hutan tersebut. Kemudian dengan hewan-hewan kami selalu mengadakan ritual adat untuk mohon izin. Setelah kami melakukan mohon izin, kemudian kami meminta restu dari alam, dari hutan, lewat mimpi atau lewat petanda-petanda yang ada, yang sudah kami siapkan di bawah pohon atau di salah satu pohon. Itu petanda-petanda di sanalah untuk menandakan, memastikan apa kami boleh membuat ladang di wilayah itu, di dalam hutan itu atau tidak. Kemudian setelah ada izin baru kami bisa membuat ladang, membuka ladang. Setelah kami membuka ladang, kemudian setelah kami membersihkan untuk menebang pohon-pohon dan kami mengumpulkan itu di tengah-tengah ladang yang kami rencanakan untuk dibuka. Setelah itu sebelum kami melakukan pembersihan ladang dengan cara membakar, kami bergotong royong membuat skat bakar bersama-sama dengan saudara-saudara kami yang di sekitarnya dan dengan pemilik tanah maupun pemilik kebun yang ada di seputar ladang yang akan kami bersihkan itu. Kemudian selesai kami membersihkan itu, barulah kami melakukan pembersihan dengan cara membakar. Selesai kami melakukan pembersihan dengan cara membakar, kami kemudian bergotong royong untuk membersihkan lokasi yang sudah kami bakar. Yang sudah kami bersihkan itu. Setelah itu, selesai itu kami bergotong royong menanam padi. Di saat kami menanam padi, juga kami di pinggir-pinggir ladang kami tanam sayur-sayuran, umbi-umbian, pohon pisang dan sebagainya, kebutuhan kami di saat sementara kami menunggu sampai panen. Dan pada saat panen juga kami selalu bergotong royong. Bergotong royong juga kami sudah punya tanaman di sana, kami sudah menitip tanaman di ladang di mana orang menanam padi, di sana kami juga ikut menanam sayur-sayuran dan sebagainya. Saat kami bergotong royong panen, kami juga akan mengambil hasil yang kami tanam itu bersama-sama Apakah kami bawa pulang atau kami makan bersama di saat kami panen. Kemudian setelah kami panen bersama, kita sudah dipilih dan diundang orangnya untuk memilih bibit padi yang mana bisa dijadikan bibit. Itu untuk padi ladang. Kemudian setelah itu kami selesai, kami panen, kami juga melakukan ritual ungkapan rasa syukur dan terima kasih kami kepada alam, kepada yang kami tahu penjaga kampung kami dengan ipaket, yaitu di tata batas desa-desa kami lakukan ritual karena kami merasa dalam setahun kami tidak ada masalah dan tidak ada mengalami sesuatu yang sangat merugikan masyarakat. Di sana kami menampaikan inilah tempat ritual kami biasanya, dan ini adalah salah satu gambar-gambar atau patung-patung yang kami yakini untuk menjaga lokasi tempat tata batas desa kami. Kemudian selesai itu, kami juga selalu di saat celah kami, ini kami kembali lagi membersihkan ladang. Di samping itu kami masuk hutan, kami merawat karena di sana obat-obatan seperti dibilang saat ini di sana ada obat-obatan atau apotik di hutan masih tersedia. Kemudian ada bunga-bunga hutan yang bagus, yang sempat foto-foto yang ditampilkan itu adalah foto bunga-bunga yang sempat terselamatkan oleh kami dari pembabatan hutan oleh perkebunan kelapa sawit dan pertambangan batu bara. Kemudian kami sebelum masuknya perkebunan kelapa sawit dan pertambangan batu bara, hidup kami rukun, damai, dan kami tidak merasa berkekurangan. Walaupun kami tidak punya uang, kami tetap merasakan hidup kami itu masih sejahtera. Tapi sekarang apa yang kami rasakan? Setelah masuknya perkebunan kelapa sawit dan pertambangan batu bara, disinilah kami merasa hidup kami sangat terhimpit dan hidup kami tidak merdeka lagi. Kami jauh dari rasa kemerdekaan. Kami masih kembali dijajah, tapi dijajah oleh orang-orang kita sendiri. Kami kehilangan sumber kehidupan kami kehilangan sumber ekonomi kami kehilangan lombong padi kami kehilangan sumber kesehatan kami yang sekarang dianggap apotik, tetapi apotik hidup kami adalah di hutan, berada di hutan. Kami kehilangan buah-buah hutan kami kehilangan air bersih, kami kehilangan biota, jangankan ikan buaya pun tidak ada. Seperti apa yang Bapak-Bapak Ibu lihat sekarang, apa yang terjadi? Kami bernapas dalam debu, kami bermandikan limbah. Jadi kalau ini masih berlanjut, tidak ada kata-kata sehat dan sejahtera bagi kami masyarakat adat. Kami berjuang mempertahankan ini. Kami berjuang mempertahankan lingkungan. Kami berjuang mempertahankan hak kami. Kami selalu berhadapan dengan penegak hukum, dengan pemerintah, dan kami dianggap tidak mendukung pembangunan. Itulah yang terjadi dengan kami masyarakat adat, khususnya di Kalimantan Tengah, Kabupaten Barito Timur. Kami hanya sedikit sisa hutan. Sedangkan selama ini kami sangat menghormati hutan, sangat menghormati alam kami sangat menghormati lingkungan kami. Tetapi pemerintahlah dan pengusahalah, pihak-pihak yang berkaitan dengan perizinanlah yang mengajar kami menghancurkan hutan kami, menghancurkan alam kami, menghancurkan lingkungan kami. Sehingga kami hidup seperti ini. Kami harus berlawanan dengan di perkebunan kelapa sawit. Kami bahkan bisa berhadapan dengan yang tulisannya Kopassus. Di pertambangan kami berhadapan dengan yang tulisannya PM. Di luar yang bertulisan polisi dan TNI. Belum lagi pemerintah daerahnya. Jadi kami masyarakat saat ini sangat terhimpit kehidupan. Bersyukur kalau kami bisa makan 3 kali sehari. Kami sudah berjuang. Kami sangat berterima kasih juga kepada panitia yang sudah mengundang kami untuk menyampaikan apa yang terjadi, apa yang kami rasakan, apa yang kami lihat, apa yang kami dengar, apa yang kami lakukan. Kami juga berterima kasih karena sudah beberapa lembaga membantu kami. Dan saat ini saya bekerja bersama GPIC Kalimantan. Dan dari tahun 2007 kami sudah berjuang. Karena saya seperti ini, karena saya adalah korban perampasan tanah. Kami berjuang melawan perkebunan kelapa sawit karena hak-hak kami dirampas dengan dalih pembangunan. Syukur-syukur kalau dibayar itu 300.000 per hektar. 300.000 rupiah per hektar itu kala itu dari tahun 2007. Tapi sekarang mungkin sudah naik karena tanahnya sudah habis. Alam kami sudah habis dan menipis. Kemudian sungai, danau, dan rawa itu ditutup. Dipindahkan. Itu untuk perkebunan kelapa sawit. Kemudian untuk pertambangan batu bara, sungai kami ditutup, dipindah, ditambang, mata air kami hilang, sedangkan kami yakin mata air itu adalah hidup dan dia bisa mengalirkan dan menjadi sumber kehidupan dan dia adalah darah bagi bumi kita. Jadi bencana-bencana alam itu disalahkan adalah Tuhan dan hujan serta alam. Kita telah berkhianat kepada Tuhan. Kenapa kita menyalahkan hujan? Kenapa kita menyalahkan alam? Sumber kesalahan adalah pada kita manusia. Karena keserakahan, kerakusan, dan kepentingan pribadi, golongan, maupun kelompok. Jadi itulah yang terjadi dengan kami. Jadi kami masyarakat adat meminta sahkan RUU masyarakat adat. Kami meminta kepada pemerintah Indonesia dan mohon di dalam G20 nanti tolong evaluasi perizinan perkebunan kelapa sawit di seluruh Indonesia. Khusus Kalimantan Tengah, Kabupaten Beritu Timur yang saat ini sudah pertambangan masuk di dalam ibu kota kabupaten, di dalam kecamatan dan desa di sekitar kami hanya beberapa kilometer dari perkantoran bupati. Ini beberapa pertambangan. Kemudian kami meminta evaluasi dari perizinan dan kembalikan hak hidup kami atas hutan. Pulihkan lingkungan yang rusak. Tanamkan yang gundul. Kami siap bersama-sama. Kami siap untuk membantu pemerintah dan kami siap ini. Karena kami selama ini sudah berusaha. Tetapi hambatannya kami selalu berhadapan dengan penegak hukum. Setiap kami mempertahankan hak kami. Setiap kami memperjuangkan lingkungan kami. Setiap kami ingin melakukan kegiatan-kegiatan untuk mempertahankan air bersih pada kami. Kami sekarang tidak punya air bersih. Di Beritu Timur tidak ada kata-kata air bersih lagi. Kecuali ada kalau ada di tengah-tengah hutan. Itu kemudian kami meminta kembalikan sumber perekonomian kami kembalikan sumber kehidupan kami kepada kami. Kalau itu tidak dikembalikan, perizinan tetap seperti virus kanker menyerang manusia, seperti itu juga virus perizinan menyerang bumi. Jadi kami memohon, stop pembabatan hutan dan pengrusakan lingkungan, stop virus perizinan itu dikeluarkan. Karena tidak ada kata-kata sehat, tidak ada kata-kata sejahtera, tidak ada kata-kata hidup rukun damai. Jika itu masih berkelanjutan, kemiskinan tidak bisa teratasi. Pemerintah jangan menyalahkan kami jika hidup kami hanya menyandarkan kepada pemerintah ini karena ulah dari izin-izin yang dikeluarkan oleh pemerintah itu sendiri atau pihak-pihak yang berkaitan dengan pengrusakan alam dan pembabatan hutan serta perebutan hak-hak kami. Jangan melegalkan segala cara. Kembalikan hak hidup kami. Kalau mau negara ini rukun, kalau mau negara ini damai, kalau mau negara ini sejahtera, sehat, itu yang kami inginkan. Sahkan undang-undang masyarakat adat. Akui dan lindungi kami. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih banyak Bu Mardiana. Thank you Bu Mardiana for very strong statement about the situations in Barito. And we are very sorry to hear the situations there. And the story from Bu Mardiana is only one of the cases from many cases in the world, as also in many other countries where the agriculture, forestry, and land use sector is also still plagued with land use conflicts and the lack of recognitions of the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. And hopefully these forums and all participants in here could support to amplify the hopes and the messages from Bu Mardiana and other key speakers later on to push for the recognitions of the indigenous peoples and local communities. And also Bu Mardiana said about a very strong statement on how many wisdoms and practices that we could learn from other communities to respect the natures and made us maybe reflect on how we could see differently about our relationship with natures. And with all of many threats that happening now towards indigenous people and local communities, especially from the irresponsible investors and private sectors, I think it is the time also for us to reflect again on how our economic systems and development perspective works that makes this injustice is kept happening until now. Thank you, Bu Mardiana, for sharing with us today and for very honest with the situations in there. So I invite also all of the participants in here to put the questions or remarks or support or feedbacks in the chat box first, and we could go to the question and answers discussion later on. And now we also have in here Fal Munduruku, the indigenous activist from Brazil, and she is a national articulator of the youth organizations and also the secretary at the Indigenous Women's Associations. Hi, Fal. Are you already here? Let me check first. Hello, Fal.
Olá, todo mundo. Não sei se vocês conseguem me ouvir. Eu estou numa área onde a internet quase não está muito acessível, então já vou me pedindo desculpa, né, nesse primeiro momento. Mas eu sou Val Munduruku, indígena desse povo, né, que vive na região do Alto Rio Tapajós. E de primeira mão, né, eu quero falar que o povo Munduruku é um povo de muita resistência, que não é diferente de outros povos que estão aqui, que enfrentam essa ameaça diretamente nos seus territórios, que vem vivenciando, né, esse aumento desse conflito, principalmente por conta da mineração ilegal dentro do nosso território, né? E eu, enquanto uma juventude indígena, uma mulher indígena, estou aqui para expressar tudo isso que vem acontecendo, principalmente na nossa região, né, que vem impactando não só a região do Alto Rio Tapajós, que é onde meu povo está maior população localizada, mas como que ele vem também atingindo as outras regiões desse rio, né? Divididos no Alto, Médio e Baixo Tapajós. E a gente vem se deparando com um cenário muito crítico, né? Desse enfrentamento diário, dessa luta pela defesa do nosso território, por conta de todo esse aval que o governo, principalmente o governo atual, quer fazer, né? Nessa liberação da mineração dentro dos territórios indígenas. E quem sofre com tudo isso somos nós, que estamos ali dependendo daquela floresta em pé, dependendo do nosso rio Tapajós, que está sendo muito contaminado e que contamina diretamente a nossa alimentação, e quem sofre com tudo isso é quem vai ficar dentro daquele território depois que o homem não indígena sai, né? Depois que o homem indígena faz todo o desmatamento, tira todos os recursos da nossa natureza, deixando para trás somente a destruição. E a gente vem nesse último ano aí num índice muito alto do principalmente para essa questão do desmatamento ilegal, e aí a gente, nas hidrelétricas no Rio Tapajós, e aí isso tem dado uma freada, e aí do outro lado vem a questão da mineração, né? E aí é uma questão que a gente está no Brasil, não só com a mineração ilegal, mas com outros povos, e o próprio povo caiapó também tem sofrido muito com isso, e a gente vem nessa aliança, né, de como chamar mais essa atenção para a proteção de tudo isso, que isso deve ser dos nossos idosos. A liderança mais antiga do meu povo vem sofrendo com tudo isso. Por conta de toda essa contaminação, os nossos territórios, né, estão sendo muito prejudicados. Isso impacta diretamente também com a questão da nossa alimentação. De uma vez a gente perde todo esse equilíbrio e a gente não tem mais acesso a essa alimentação que antes a gente tinha, uma alimentação saudável, por consequência da questão das mudanças climáticas, né? A gente vê que acorda no Brasil e altos toda a nossa região, onde a gente fala que a gente está no olho do furacão, porque tem garimpeiros legais, tem querendo ser instalado, tem hidrelétricas, tem colocar isso tudo sem ter nenhum que a consulta prévia e informada que muitos povos têm e muitos não levam isso em consideração. Então, também foi impactado por isso, né? Toda a gente com a notícia de que
Hello, folks.
Hi, Artie.
I think the connections.
Val has mentioned that there is some difficulties with internet.
Yeah, it's all right. So maybe we could get back to Val again when she's entered the rooms. Is it okay? I think she's just signed out from the Zoom. Okay, so while waiting for Val, I think Val mentions this very strong statement also like Bu Mardiana on how the situations on the Tapajós community and people along the river and how they are fighting to defend their territories. Oh, I think Val is already here again. Hello, Val. Could you hear me? Maybe you... Hello.
Oi, gente. Voltei.
Okay.
E vou desligar para ver se consigo me conectar melhor. Não sei onde parei. Foram interrompidos, né, por essa queda da internet.
Yeah, it's all right, Val. Please continue your explanations.
E aí, como eu venho falando, né, a gente vem nesse descontrole e muito também nessa nossa perda de direitos que a gente vem enfrentando todos os dias. E quem sofre com tudo isso somos nós, né, a juventude e as mulheres indígenas que têm o seu próprio território enquanto corpo também ameaçado, né? Então, é expressante o número que tem aumentado na minha região, sobretudo o garimpo ilegal, né, que vem prejudicando todo esse modo de vida que tem o meu povo e interfere também em outras populações que vivem à margem do Rio Tapajós, né? Tem a minha população que é indígena, mas também tem outras populações que dependem do consumo direto do peixe, que consome direto a água que está sendo contaminado, né? As margens do Rio Tapajós, tem pessoas que são quilombolas, essa luta diária em defesa do território. E aí, como que isso tem impactado também, por outro lado, né? São as ameaças dessas pessoas que estão nessa linha de frente fazendo essa defesa que acabam voltando para si toda essa visibilidade também impactada com isso. E aí uma coisa que a gente tem enfrentado muito também dos territórios é um novo termo que a gente vê falando hoje no Brasil, que é com ansiedade, né? Como que tudo isso impacta diretamente na minha vida, como que tem rolado essa preocupação com o que será daqui para frente, né? Daqui para frente nessa questão mais ambiental e que tem preocupado as minhas lideranças e são pessoas idosas que têm essa visão e que estão falando para a nossa juventude, principalmente, né? Ter essa voz e levar para além, né? Continuar essa luta que eles trazem na proteção, na defesa dos nossos lugares encantados, que são um dos lugares que também estão sendo mais prejudicados nesse território. E a gente fala que tem essa relação que também faz parte do nosso equilíbrio, né? A gente, quanto seres que vem de uma cultura muito ancestral, assim, que tem essa ligação mais forte com o território, está sendo impactado, né? E a gente fala que os nossos ancestrais estão pedindo para que a gente faça alguma coisa por eles, e a gente tem feito isso, né? Tem tentado proteger esse território, que também é importante para eles. E a gente se coloca muito nesse lugar de que eu preciso da natureza e a natureza está precisando de mim, né? Ela está pedindo socorro e assim, é uma proteção que não é só meu dever de defender que estou lá, né? Mas é uma luta que deve ser de todos nós, principalmente pessoas que não estão conectadas com essa luta, que acham que a Amazônia é só mais uma floresta que não tem importância, e a gente sabe, principalmente enquanto brasileiro, que tem a sua devida importância, não só para nós que estamos nessa localidade, mas para outras pessoas que estão em outras regiões do Brasil, mas também em outros países, né? Então, esse dever e esse comprometimento de cuidar dessa riqueza toda que sim, a floresta em pé, ela vale muito, né? Mais em pé do que derrubada, do que dando lugar a várias piscinas de lamas, como a gente tem visto na nossa floresta, no nosso Rio Tapajós, dando lugar a vários pastos de gado. É um agronegócio que está também de forma desordenada dentro dos territórios. Isso não vale para a gente, né? O que vale para a gente é ter a nossa floresta, o nosso rio correndo com os percursos naturais, e então a gente se vê muito nesse lugar de tentar somar as forças de outras pessoas, de outros olhares que precisam estar unidos nessa luta, né, em defesa da nossa casa, do nosso lar, que é a Amazônia. E aí a gente se depara todos os dias que o número da Amazônia de desmatamento vem aumentando, e isso para a gente é assustador, mas no lugar de não é só a Amazônia enquanto floresta que está pedindo socorro, né? E aí eu convido a gente também a olhar esse lado mais da Amazônia enquanto a Amazônia das pessoas. Tem pessoas que dependem desse território, e acho que a gente entra agora num cenário muito importante, que é um ano de eleições, principalmente no Brasil, né? Pensar na questão do nosso voto, ter o voto consciente, que a minha decisão do hoje pode impactar qual vai ser esse impacto nos próximos cenários dos anos, né? Qual que vai ser esse impacto principalmente também no cenário ambiental, mas trazendo mais também para esse lado socioambiental, da preocupação que tem com as pessoas da floresta e que tem essa relação de respeito, que está cuidando dessa... Nossas lutas não são vistas, né? São pessoas que estão ali nessa linha de frente. E aí eu trago tantas pessoas que vivem dentro dos territórios, mas também de outras pessoas que vivem nos centros urbanos da Amazônia e que têm sofrido esse impacto direto, né? Nessa mudança principalmente do clima, mas enquanto pessoas que estão ali para proteger o território e que não têm essa sua luta vista. E aí a gente se depara com esse cenário de eleições, né? Aqui no Brasil agora, de conscientizar a juventude também, que são um número muito expressante de novos eleitores que tiraram os títulos e pode fazer todo esse cenário mudar com uma simples conscientização, né, da importância do voto para cada pessoa. E pensando também no nosso cenário internacional, né, de espaço que a gente vem vivenciado na Amazônia, todo esse desrespeito, essas violências que vem sofrendo não só na floresta, no meio ambiente, mas contra as próprias pessoas que estão lá dentro, né? É uma luta que a gente tem enfrentado e é real. A gente vê vários noticiários, mas às vezes a gente vai trocar com as outras pessoas e muita gente não sabe do que realmente está acontecendo aqui no nosso cenário brasileiro, né? E aí a gente, enquanto ocupa espaços internacionais também, é uma forma de levar e mostrar o que está acontecendo. Eu já participei de 2 conferências pelo clima, né? A COP25 e a COP26, e enquanto juventude brasileira está ali naquele espaço, levando a minha voz, levando a luta de tantos outros povos do Brasil, é muito significante. E a gente vê que esse número de representatividade tem crescido, né? Nesse cenário internacional. E é muito importante, porque era muito difícil ter acesso e a permanência nesses espaços, e hoje a gente consegue também quebrar tudo isso, a gente consegue estar ali dentro, falando por nós mesmos, né? Temos as nossas narrativas, temos as nossas vivências que precisam ser levadas em consideração nas horas dessas tomadas de decisões, e somos nós que somos conhecedores, sabedores de tudo isso, que precisamos estar lá. Não precisamos de ninguém falando por nós, nós somos as nossas próprias vozes, né? Então, precisa vir também a nossa participação desses espaços, e a gente tem conquistado muito isso, de levar as nossas mensagens, de passar a nossa mensagem do que está acontecendo aqui e fazer as pessoas se alertarem a essa emergência que a gente tem vivenciado, né? Tanto no cenário ambiental quanto nesse cenário mais social, e aí eu falo muito dessa questão mais ligada ao nosso território, que tem sofrido com tudo isso, em nome do meu povo Munduruku, né, em nome da juventude do povo Munduruku. Essa é a minha mensagem, de ter esse olhar de atenção para a nossa região, mas nesse sentido do cuidado, né, do que a Amazônia realmente representa também para a gente no Brasil, mas assim, ter essa relação de pertencimento e de respeito, né? A gente sabe que muitas outras coisas são precisas para fazer na nossa região, mas que a gente não se esqueça de que a gente depende desse desenvolvimento e que, de fato, ele precisa ser também de uma forma mais sustentável, né? E a gente... Será que isso existe, né? Esse desenvolvimento sustentável? Os povos tradicionais, eles estão aqui para mostrar que sim, que a gente tem essa tecnologia, tem esse poder de conhecimento e que a gente só precisa ser ouvido e ser respeitado para tudo que vier e que for as nossas vidas, que vai impactar, que dito isso, as pessoas possam também ter esse olhar, né? Como que meu projeto vai impactar na vida daquela comunidade, no território, e como que isso tem muito a ver, e todo o conhecimento que a gente tem da tecnologia, né? A gente fala que o povo indígena, sobretudo, é um povo muito da tecnologia, que muitas pessoas ainda precisam entender realmente qual é a tecnologia que a gente fala, que é de viver em harmonia também com a natureza, respeitando sempre nossos lugares sagrados. Mas é isso, a gente vem nesse enfrentamento todos os dias, acordando com um novo projeto de lei que visa a não liberação dos nossos territórios, a liberação de mineração dentro dos territórios e tantas outras violações também de tantos outros direitos que a gente já garantiu e agora a gente vem nesse retrocesso, né? E a gente vem muito nessa afirmação de que a gente precisa desse cenário e que a nossa atuação ela começa muito agora, né? De estar fazendo tudo isso, esse cenário todo mudar em nome do nossa proteção, porque a gente sabe que vivendo em harmonia com a natureza a gente consegue ter uma perspectiva de futuro, né? Mas a gente precisa ser visto enquanto essa sociedade que precisa. A minha contribuição aqui na fala, infelizmente, eu não consegui acompanhar mais o painel, a internet está cortando muito. Tá nesse espaço trocando, né? Agora eu vi outras realidades que precisam se somar nessa defesa, nessa proteção também.
Thank you, Fal, for sharing the situations in your community and in Amazon situations, and also your statement on the critical involvement of youth community, and also your call to us that the protecting the environment is not only the indigenous groups' duty, but also everyone's duties. You also mentioned about interesting things related to intersectionalities issues, where, for instance, women and youth is disproportionately impacted by these environmental distractions. Maybe a little bit follow up from your statement, Fal, before we go to the question and answer sessions. Maybe you could share to us your strategy or your community strategies, especially to raise the awareness towards youth community about the importance of voting, right voting towards the leader that protect the rights of indigenous people and also environment. Maybe you could share a bit about that, Paul? Hi, Fal, are you still there? Sorry, let me check first. Okay, I think Fal is just sign out, so we could came back to Fal again, maybe in the discussion sessions. So yeah, last but not least, before we go to the Q&A sessions, we have a speakers, also the last speakers as the representative also from our sub-working group, agriculture, forestry, and land use and rights from environment and climate and working group of C20s. So welcome Anggalia Putri, or usually we call it Kaangi. She is a climate activist that has a deep love for forests and natures, and also she is a co-coordinator for this sub-working group. Hi Kaangi.
Good evening everyone. Yeah. Thank you so much Kak Arti. Thank you Bang Tori, Ibu Mardiana, Ruth, Val. I am humbled to be honest, to share this forum with you, to hear your stories and to hear your struggles and also to hear your spirit. So first, I would like to start by appreciating that level of honesty and presence in this forum. Sometimes we forget that we are humans and we are not just a set of principles or brains flying around. We have all these hearts and emotions, and I would like to acknowledge. And to all of you, thank you so much. In Indonesia, this is Friday night, so thank you so much for sacrificing your Friday night to join us. My name is Anggi. Tonight I'm representing the sub-working group of agriculture, forestry, land use and rights of the Environment, Climate Justice and Energy Transitions Working Group of the Civil 20. First of all, I would also take this opportunity to extend my appreciation to the Environment Deputies Meeting and Climate Sustainability Working Group of the G20, our counterpart, for inviting our working group as an observer in the 3rd EDM CSWG meeting next week. And I really hope that we can have meaningful exchanges and dialogues, especially since the Environment and Climate Ministerial meeting is approaching in only 4 days. So friends, colleagues, and everyone on YouTube as well, my presentation tonight is titled Rights-Based Protection and Restoration of Natural Ecosystems for Climate Justice. I am glad that I am the last to speak because I feel justified in because I hope that what we in the working group of Civil 20, in the sub-working group of Afolu and Rights, what we stand for, what we are trying to bring to the G20 may resonate with you and your struggles on the ground. I would like to reiterate why we are here in Civil 20. We are here to ensure that world leaders listen to not only voices from the government or the business sectors, but also from the civil society and communities. So our aim is to protect the environment, to promote social and economic development, human rights, and the principle of leaving no one behind that Bang Tori also has mentioned before. I would also emphasize that reaching 1.5 degree is imperative for climate justice. This IPCC report that Bang Tori has mentioned has made it clear for us, the science is clear that we have to peak emissions before 2025. We have to halve our world emission by 2030, and we have to reach net zero by 2050s. Therefore, increasing ambition based on historical depth and the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities is key in achieving climate justice. I would also like to highlight President Joko Widodo's statement that he will use this momentum of Indonesia's presidency to fight for the interest of developing countries. In our view, climate justice as a principle is a vital interest of developing countries. And this concept has been noted by the Glasgow Climate Pact agreed in 2021. And it should also be acknowledged. It should be endorsed in the ministerial communique on environment and climate and sustainability, and also in G20 leaders' Bali Declaration. Now I would like to talk a little bit why Afolu, or agriculture, forestry, and land use, is important in the context of G20. We all know that the G20 is responsible for around 75% of global GHGs, including from land use, including from forestry. And from 2015 to 2020, G20 countries, with the exception of some countries due to lack of data, have lost almost 4 million hectares of forest area per year. You have heard from Ibu Mardiana, you have heard also from Val how this on the ground impact their lives. But the IPCC report has also made it clear of the great potential of this sector to mitigate climate change. Protection of forests, restoration of forests, and other ecosystems provides the largest and cost-effective mitigation potential in the Afolu sector. However, there is an important caveat that it cannot compensate delayed emissions reductions in other sectors, most notably in the burning of fossil fuel that must end. However, sadly, there's a huge gap between the finance that is needed to realize that potential and what is actually spent, between 400 billion USD per year and just less than 1 billion USD per year. Now, G20 has a lot of commitments on Afolu sector. I will not mention it one by one, but they have commitments on biodiversity. They have commitments on natural ecosystems, including nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based approaches, planting 1 trillion trees, conservation and protection of natural resources, and etc. They also have acknowledged the commitment to enhance their climate commitment, both short-term and long-term. They have commitments, many commitments on land degradation. They have commitments on finance. They have recognized the importance of disclosing financial disclosure on nature-related aspects, and also on accelerating finance for mitigation and adaptation. But we believe that the G20 must adopt a stronger position on rights and protection of nature to achieve the climate justice. This is our recommendations for the G20 that is a part of our policy brief in our working group and sub-working group. First, enhancing land and sea-based actions, which is a priority agenda of the EDM CSWG, must start with protecting what's left. We are glad that the presidency of Indonesian presidency has emphasized the importance of peatland and mangrove restoration, for example. However, halting the loss of existing peatland and mangroves for any kind of development project, as well as the remaining natural forests, must also be emphasized. We cannot just restore and then destroy what's left. As you can see, the data says that 5 G20 members contribute to 87% of tree cover loss minus the EU, including Russia, Brazil, Canada, the US, and Indonesia, which are in the top 5. However, aside from the tree cover loss, the IPCC report has highlighted the special importance of halting tropical primary forest loss. And along with, if G20 commits more strongly to protecting what is left, along with fighting wildlife trafficking, this will help halt species extinction that we are facing. Second, I hope this resonates with Ibu Mariana, with Val, with Ruth. Recognition and protection of indigenous peoples' tenure rights must be a part of all deal, in all land, all sea-based actions, in the sustainable recovery that is also highlighted as G20 agenda, and also in resource mobilization. G20 must strive to close two important gaps: the gaps in recognition and the gaps in finance. Data says that half of the world's land is associated with a customary land use claim, but only 10% is legally under indigenous and community ownership. Other data has already shown that indigenous peoples and land rights holding communities have lower rates of deforestation. They store more carbon, they store more biodiversity. However, they only have few rights, with states owning the majority of all forests globally. And data for RFN says projects supporting IPLC tenure and forest management receive funding less than 1% of ODA, official development assistance, which is very concerning. So our third call is to increase support for ecosystem-based adaptation to help the most vulnerable. I think Ruth has shared a very important story about how adaptation tailored to local communities' needs can really help communities mitigate the risks related to climate change. And we have so many, almost 33, 36 billion people living in a highly vulnerable context. And ecosystem-based approach is continues receiving less funding that it needs to thrive. 4, our call is to increase support for sustainable agriculture based on local wisdom. Again, Ibu Mariana has told us her story about how indigenous people manage their land. We know that 3/4 of deforestation in the tropics is driven by agriculture, mostly industrial agriculture. So G20 must promote agroecology rather than only focusing on monoculture, industrial agriculture, and also protecting farmer seeds and indigenous people's traditional knowledge and agricultural practices. Advancing farmers' rights, indigenous people's rights, and workers' rights are also important, so we can transition to a more just, more sustainable agriculture. Our 5th call is to stop any form of violence, threat of violence, intimidation, and criminalization against environmental defenders. I think Val has shared with you the condition in Brazil, for example, and data says that in 2017, 2018, only 1 year, almost 300 environmental defenders were killed for protecting their land, for trying to protect the natural resources that provide them with life. And 6, this brings us to our 6th call, is to protect nature, to protect rights in energy transitions. IEA says that the consumption of minerals to build renewable energy technologies could increase 6-fold by 2050. This could mean the expansion of mining that we know have detrimental effects on society. And another surprising or concerning data is that the majority of the world's energy transition minerals and metals projects are located either on or near indigenous peoples or peasant lands, with adverse conditions for human rights, compatible permitting, consultation, with adverse conditions for consent. Therefore, in our recommendation, we call on G20 leaders first to adopt a commitment to ensure the establishment of a system that involves communities, especially vulnerable communities, in any development program and projects, including climate projects, by increasing access to information and decision-making. I hope this resonates as well with Bang Tori's 4 principles of justice, including procedural justice, and what Ruth has shared with us, that we need to be involved. We need our voices to be taken into account. Second is to adopt a commitment to stop conversion of natural forests, peatland, grassland, and other biodiverse ecosystem. Third is to adopt an action plan to halt species extinction by fighting against illicit wildlife trafficking as well as habitats destruction. 4 is to adopt an action plan to expedite the recognition of indigenous peoples and local communities' territories and rights to natural resources, including, I hope this is also relates to what Ibu Mardiana said, by immediately legislating IPLC rights in G20 countries. 5, to adopt an action plan to help vulnerable communities in areas hardest hit by climate change with massive losses and damages by refocusing funding, including increasing support for ecosystem-based adaptation, tailored to what community needs. 6 is to adopt the principle of circularity in energy transitions and a commitment to safeguard community rights, to safeguard the environment, including by ensuring free, prior, and informed consent from impacted communities. And lastly is to adopt a commitment to stop any form of violence, threat of violence, intimidation, and criminalization against environmental defenders, and to endorse the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. This brings me to my last slide. Finally, to really recover stronger together, we call for the ministerial communique on environment and climate and sustainability and G20 leaders declaration to acknowledge and endorse the principle of climate justice in addressing climate change. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you all for the attention, and back to you, Karti.
Thank you very much, Kak Anggi, for sharing the calls towards G20 from us. Hopefully it's resonated with all of our discussions from our previous key speakers. And hopefully all of us in here, I know we came from various backgrounds. I see media people in here, I see civil society in here, I see the government in here. All of us here could amplify this message through our channel, through our government, push our government, and to start taking actions and acknowledge and endorsing the climate justice principles that you professionally mentioned. So now we will enter the Q&A discussions. I see there are already several questions in the chat box, but I also invite for all of the participants, if you want to ask your questions directly, you could also use the raise hand features. So I inquiry some of the questions. Maybe I will first read all of the questions towards specific people in here, and you could answer these questions. And after that, if there's some of the raising hands questions, I will also give a floor to the participants. So the first one, I see that some of the questions towards Tori. So I try to sum up a bit the questions. So the first one is, how do you see the Indonesian government policy have provided the climate justice for the people in Indonesia, especially with the emergence of Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja and also the development of the new capital cities in Kalimantan, and the perspective of development of the government in Indonesia towards the climate justice? Maybe Bang Tori, you would like to respond a bit related to those questions?
So there are 2 questions. Yeah, first about the omnibus law, the Undang-Undang Cilaka, and also about the new capital in East Kalimantan. First things, let's talk about the four pillars of the justice, of the climate justice that has been. So I would go back to the report, what is suggested by the IPCC, because it's easier then. First, there are four pillars. First is about recognitions. The second is about the procedures. The second is about the distributive justice, and the fourth is about the governance, the institutions of to ensure that justice will be implemented. So the first things, the process of omnibus law, the process of making omnibus law, the black box. Is it participatory? Do we have can we have any concerns, any inputs to the process? So in terms of justice, in terms of environmental justice, in terms of climate justice, the first pillar is not fulfilled. And also in the IKN, is there any real participations of everyone, particularly those on the sites of the new capital? What kind of participations that we see? You can answer. If the participation is not there, how can we expect that will be justice in the outcomes? And the second, okay. And the second, it's the procedures of justice. Do we have any formal? Do we have a good process to create participations? Is there a good process? No, I think in both issues, both in IKN and also in the omnibus law. And the third is about the outcomes of the justice of justice. It is clear that many CSO and also academics say that on omnibus law that on the environmental issues, the participations and of the people is narrowing. The law is narrowing the participations, and I think if you're talking about these participations, talking about how people cannot say anything about the projects, no justice can be done. No justice can be fulfilled. I think that's my comment. If you want to look at the you can read in many papers, you can read in many reports, and you can look back at the Ibu Mardiana testimonies that Ibu Mardiana is only one Ibu Mardiana case happening all over Indonesia, and omnibus law is actually can make it worse. So I don't think that I don't think that it is necessary for me to explain what are the impacts. But if you look at the procedures on the four pillars of the justice, of the climate justice suggested by IPCC, the first pillars, if you look at the first pillar only, it is already failed to fulfill justice. That's my comment to the questions, Arti.
Thank you, Bang Tori. I think those four principles could be used for all of us to see whether a certain regulations is bring a justice or not on the tables, or some solutions bring just transitions or not. So I will come back to you again, but now I see Val is here again because the signals for Val is quite unstable. So I will start maybe from Val. Val, could you hear me? Let me check first. Okay, so this signing out again. So maybe I could go to Bu Mardiana first. So Bu Mardiana, there's a questions from the participants regarding your view about the development of new capital cities in Kalimantan. What do you think about that, Bu?
Ibu kota baru. Kalau menurut saya, dengan masuknya pembangunan ibu kota baru ini sangat mempengaruhi peradaban masyarakat adat bagi kami orang Kalimantan. Karena apa? Kehidupan kami berkaitan dengan sumber daya alam, berkaitan dengan hutan, berkaitan dengan lingkungan. Karena di sana saudara-saudara kami masyarakat adat punya sumber kehidupan, punya tanah, punya hak atas tanah, dan punya situs-situs yang bersejarah. Jadi bagaimana karena pembangunan ini nanti bisa merubah dan memindah situs-situs yang bersejarah dan makam-makam tua yang sudah diwariskan dan perlu dirawat, dijaga. Kemudian hak-hak masyarakat adat yang sudah ada di sana, sumber dan napas kehidupan masyarakat adat yang sudah ada di sana, apakah itu akan diganti oleh pemerintah, dan bagaimana legalitas hak-hak mereka itu. Itu bagi saya tidak semudah itu memindahkan ibu kota negara. Karena kami masyarakat adat belum tentu seperti kami hanya tahu cerita tentang pemindahan itu. Tetapi kami tidak pernah tahu, padahal kami provinsinya sangat berdekatan dan mungkin bisa menjadi penyangga untuk ibu kota kabupaten. Jadi kami tidak pernah dilibatkan dalam persoalan ini untuk ikut menyuarakan apa yang harus dilakukan dan apa yang harus dijalankan oleh pemerintah di dalam melaksanakan pembangunan itu untuk menghadapi apa yang sudah dimiliki oleh masyarakat adat di situ turun-temurun. Sama seperti halnya tempat kami sebagai wilayah penyangga. Tetapi kami sudah kehilangan segalanya. Karena itu semua diklaim oleh Kementerian Kehutanan, kemudian kami bisa dipindah-pindah. Untuk hutan-hutannya itu sebagai dikeluarkan perizinan pertambangan batubara. Jadi bagaimana kami bisa hidup? Bagaimana kami bisa menjadi daerah penyangga? Kalau pemerintah iya terus, tapi tidak ada mereka berkomunikasi, berkonsultasi dengan kami. Kami adalah korban dari rasa ambisi pemerintahan juga. Itu kalau pendapat saya itu saja. Kami mohon hormatilah kami, manusiakan kami.
Oke, terima kasih Bu Mardiana. Thank you Bu Mardiana. I think the statements also resonate with Ruth's statement previously, where the access to information is the key thing in the first process, because we couldn't push for the participations if the information is not there and could be accessed by the indigenous people and the local communities. So I would like to go to Ruth after this. Hi, Ruth. So because the Antigua and Barbuda is a small island countries that are very vulnerable for the climate crisis impact. What do you think about and your perspective about loss and damage mechanism and whether we could push G20 leaders to endorse this? Maybe you could share your view a bit about this, Ruth?
Yes, that mechanism, that loss and damage has been talked about so much, and up to now, we don't see no action. And with environmental issues, the fires, the flooding, the immigrant situation, now the war, taking up the developed countries' time, I really think it's going to be pushed on the back burner. So what I do with my groups, I tell them, don't let's sit and wait. Let's be ambitious with local adaptation efforts. There are many low-hanging fruits that we can work on. We have to come up with innovative solutions that can be found right on the island. That's what I tell them. We can't sit and wait. We have been waiting, we have been hearing about this loss and damage. So my vision, my utterance to the groups, let's not wait. Let's find local solutions. Let's be innovative and come up with our solutions for the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. For the strong statement that local solutions is very key and how maybe all of us in here also could push to supporting this kind of solutions. So maybe after this, I see two questions to Anggi. Anggi, maybe you could share your view a bit about how G20 commitments support people who be pioneer or motivator to care the environments, and most of them be suffered by institution or the owner of the biggest factories. That's the first ones. And the second one is how we could ensure that the energy transitions can be realized in 2050. Do you see that the roadmap and existing policy are heading there? Meanwhile, the new renewable energy bill has not been approved yet. Anggi, maybe you could share a bit your view regarding that.
Thank you, Kak Arti. Maybe from the second question from Pak Jackson. And I am not an expert in energy. However, and I would like to point out to several experts in this forum, for example, from Coaction. We have Kak Verena, that is expert from energy. And it is indeed very hard in this situation, in this not only humanitarian crisis due to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, but also in the energy crisis and impending food crisis. It is true that Indonesia is not aiming for 2050 climate neutrality or zero net emissions. We are aiming for 2060, but we are also relying on the spirit or sooner. So 2060 or sooner. So we are relying on that spirit. However, our roadmap for energy with the still a massive use of coal, I don't know. I honestly don't know how that the world, not only Indonesia, the world can reach net zero emissions, because we see the rollback of climate policies as well in other countries. We see the struggle in the United States. We see the struggle in UK. We see the struggle in Europe, for example, in Germany that has
dan juga Jerman yang sudah memulai diskusi untuk menggunakan batu bara lagi.
And I think in our view, this short-term, very urgent interest to secure energy cannot replace our longer-term interests to transition to renewable energy. And I would also point out that our coordinator for the working group from Institute for Essential Service Reforms is also here in the forum, and maybe they can elaborate more, Pak Jackson, to answer your questions more accurately. And Kaarti, I'm sorry, I kind of lost the first question. Could you repeat it for me?
Okay, so the first question is, how do you see the G20 commitments support the front runner? Because most of them is suffered by, get impacted by the institutions or the private sectors itself.
So people on the ground, right?
Yeah.
It is a very, very valid question. So this is why in our policy brief, in our first call is for the G20 to commit the G20 countries to ensure the establishment of a system that can really hear out, that can really satisfy the procedural justice of vulnerable communities or communities impacted by any development projects. Because we don't think that it is only existing development projects that need to be safeguarded, that need to have such a system, but also climate projects. We cannot afford climate projects, including, for example, energy transition projects or other Afolu mitigation projects, worsens the conditions of the rights of the people. This is why, because G20 is not a very, we can say it's a forum, right? But its decisions can have impacts on the ground, because this is the forum of very powerful countries. So if the G20 and G20 countries can commit to honoring, to establish such a system, although some call it is just a procedural system, right? I think it would help front runners or people on the ground to be listened to. And Kaarti and friends and colleagues, I think what Bang Tori has highlighted, that now more and more reports, more and more scientific reports have highlighted the importance of climate justice, and the Glasgow Climate Pact also noted, although for some, the importance of climate justice in addressing climate change. I think G20 has a moral obligation to heed those calls. Although I personally don't know where in the institutions of G20 it can be put, but nevertheless, I think this is what we as civil society owes to the people, owes to the communities, to keep sounding over and over again as the system, to hear the people, to consult, to gain consent from them. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, thank you, Kaanggi. So now I have a questions for all speakers that I get from the chats. So the questions is, what do you personally wish to see from the C20 or Civil 20 and G20 process? Do you think it's already good, efficient, or do you see some area that need to be improved, and things like that? So I would like to invite, to all of the speakers who want to go first. Is there anyone who want to go first?
Okay,
Maybe.
I'll start.
Okay, Ruth. Okay, Ruth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just as how your organization has built a relationship with me, that's how we have to do, build the partnerships, build the collaborations, be a global force to deal with, and they must listen to us. Let's continue to support each other, show empathy, show support, build some really good partnerships, and let's push for our local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So hopefully these kind of conversations, collaborations, because the change will not be done by the small people. We need together of all of our efforts here. Okay, so the others, maybe Bang Tori, you want to go?
Okay. First, we have to understand that G20 is the club of the rich countries and the new rich countries that actually have a strong voice in the global policies, including climate change policies, and actually as the strongest voice, the strongest driver of global policies, G20 should have have to give an examples of how to create justice, how to create climate justice. First, the question is to this forum, the C20 forum. Is it easy for us to talk with the government? Is it easy for us to get more transparency of the draft of the communique, the drafts of what they want to they will agree on in November? If the G20 is actually want to move forward to climate justice, to the global justice, the first thing is to recognize us, C20, to make it easier to talk with them, and to be transparent in the whole process, the draft. Is there any easy way for us to understand what they are going to agree on in November? And I think that's I wish, this is a wish, a good wish, maybe a wish list, a dream of my personal dream. So if G20 cannot bring these examples to other countries, then we still need to our struggle still need to be going on, and maybe we have to struggle harder than we have done today. That's, I think, Arti.
Thank you, Bang Tori. Maybe Bu Mardiana or Kangi would like to add something related to this.
Thank you, Kak Arti, and thank you for the question for Kevin. Personal wish, right?
Terima kasih atas terima kasih. Kami hanya ingin bagaimana kita semua dari LSM maupun dari masyarakat yang peduli dengan kemanusiaan dan dengan lingkungan, dengan hutannya, bisa mempersatukan suara agar bisa dibawa masuk ke dalam pembicaraan di dalam G20 itu nanti. Suara-suara masyarakat saya rasa sangat dibutuhkan kalau memang G20 ini bertujuan untuk mengurangi emisi. Jadi mereka harus mendengar suara-suara masyarakat dan melewati, karena kalau masyarakat saya rasa tidak mungkin masuk ke sana. Jadi melewati lembaga-lembaga atau LSM yang berkompetensi untuk masuk ke dalam lingkup G20 supaya bisa menyuarakan apa yang sebenarnya terjadi di masyarakat ini. Itu saja.
Thank you, Bu Mardiana. Terima kasih, Bu Mardiana. Kangi, you would like to add something also?
Yes, thank you. And I also echo the sentiments that, well, I believe in process. Like I personally believe in process. I personally believe in meetings that can transform relations, that can make us understand each other more. And therefore, my personal hope for the G20 and C20 process is that for G20 and C20 to be able to have more meaningful exchanges, more meaningful dialogues, not just exchanging policy briefs or not just presenting our key issues, but also to really talk about how our recommendations can be considered and reflected in the final outcome. And again, I would like to appreciate the EDM, CSWG for extending their invitation to our working group as to be an observer in their third working group next week. And I really look forward to having those meaningful discussions with them. And also, lastly, like Ibu Mardiana said, I hope that the G20 can really listen to the stories from the ground, how maybe we cannot contextualize everything, all those stories, all those struggles in the G20 agenda, priority agenda or processes. However, to infuse G20 leaders' discussion with realities of the people on the ground is very important. And I think C20 has a very important role to make it happen. So stay tuned for C20 Summit maybe in October, right, Kak Arti? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kangi. I think as a civil society and a community, I think we already used to this long and uphill task, right? I mean, those challenges will hopefully will not stop us to continue the dialogue, engagements, and whenever we have a change to raise our voices through this kind of meeting, through digital media, or through face-to-face meeting, or like Bang Tori mentioned, through amplifying our voices in the streets. And hopefully the G20 leaders could actually listen to us and also endorse the voices of the community and the civil society. So before we close our sessions, because it's already a little bit late night in Indonesia, and it's early morning, I think, in Brazil. So I would like to ask for all of the speakers to give your last statements for the participants or your call to the G20 leaders. So who would like to start? Bu Mardiana, you would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
My poll is going. I'd like to say I enjoyed being here. I want to keep this connection, this relationship building with you so that I can do my part to support your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth, also for being us today. Bu Mardiana, you would like to give your last statement to us?
Saya ingin di dalam G20 ini bisa menetapkan apa yang harus ditegaskan di dalam menghentikan pengrusakan alam melewati perusahaan pertambangan batu bara dan perkebunan kelapa sawit. Cukup yang ada dan meminta bagaimana G20 bisa mendukung masyarakat yang terdampak oleh perusahaan ini seperti mengembalikan hak masyarakat, kemudian memulihkan yang lingkungan-lingkungan yang sudah rusak, kemudian bagaimana mereka bisa membantu masyarakat untuk menghijaukan kembali hutan-hutan yang sudah gundul. Itu permintaan saya. Dan kemudian bagaimana di G20 ini nanti juga bisa mendukung pengesahan, pengakuan, dan perlindungan terhadap masyarakat adat. Undang-undang yang sudah di puluhan tahun diajukan ke pemerintahan maupun DPR. Sampai sekarang tidak ada sama sekali niat pemerintah untuk mengesahkan itu. Niat pemerintah maupun DPR. Untuk mengakui kami sebagai warga negara Indonesia. Untuk melindungi kami sebagai manusia. Memanusiakan kami menjadi manusia. Manusiakan kami menjadi manusia. Itu saja.
Terima kasih Bu Mardiana. Thank you Bu Mardiana. Bang Tori?
Maybe I will repeat again. Actually, this forum, the G20, the rich countries should be giving a good examples for the other countries on the recognitions of the people, and they should, because they are rich, of course, they should also encourage the process of listening to us, a better transparency, much better transparencies on each process, because if not, what kind of justice that we can be the outcome? Thank you.
Thank you, Bang Tori. Kak Anggi?
Thank you. So I believe that this is a high time for Indonesia's presidency to actively promote climate justice principle as a part of the developing country's interest, to be endorsed, to be acknowledged, and to be noted in all G20 outcomes, especially in the G20 Leaders Declaration. Thank you, Karti.
Okay, thank you, Kak Anggi. I see Val is already signing out, but hopefully her message previously is already also amplified and resonate with all of you guys. And before we close the sessions, I think some of the sentence and word that I keep here repeating from the speaker is the climate change is a race of the class system of power and economic gap between rich and poor. And also in order to prevent the climate crisis and address the climate crisis, we should collectively demand for the climate justice, one that addresses social, economic, political, and civil rights, especially for the marginalized populations. And we hear also from all of you guys that the civic space is also very critical to these processes, because otherwise we couldn't achieve the just transitions that we envision for the futures. And thank you for all of the panelists who already shared their insights, their hopes, and their concerns and their problems, and also for all of the participants that stay with us tonight or today. And hopefully the government leaders could hear our concern and take the concrete actions, or all of the participants in here could amplify our message through our channel or each of our channels. So this is all for today's sessions. On behalf of the organizer of the C20 working groups, me, Archindala from the Indonesia, would like to thank all of you once again, and would like to close these sessions with the statement that the planet is in crisis, but solutions are in reach if us and our leaders are willing to take actions to balance the power, transform our economic system, redistribute of resources and means of protections, and also protecting rights of vulnerable and marginalized groups, and give a civic space to the civil society. So join us in taking action to climate it, and starting now. Thank you, everyone, and see you again. Maybe there's also, it's good for us if we could take a picture sessions.
Please do, Karen.
Okay, so I will count. Ruth, could you put your camera a bit? Okay, so for everyone that want to take a pictures, please open your camera. So yeah, I will count down. First, let me check. Okay, 1. Okay, for everyone that want to open the camera, there's still a process. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Once again, 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and see you on the next changes. Goodbye, good night, good morning, good evening, everyone.